This video is going to be long. How's it going, YouTube? I hope you're staying safe at home. Today I'm going to teach you how to edit in the bigger version of Lightroom CC, or more exactly in the first version, the Lightroom Classic CC. This video is intended for beginners, that's why it's so long, but even if you're advanced, you might learn some few tips and tricks, so stick around till the end. Now without further ado, let's get to it. This is Lightroom Classic CC. CC stands for Creative Cloud for those who did not know already. And this version of Lightroom was the first one created. That is why it has a different interface from Lightroom CC and Lightroom CC Mobile. Now let's drag and drop the photos in. This will only work if you are in the library panel. Also, quick note, we are working with raw images, so what you will learn here will work on raw files without issues. On JPEGs, not so much. And another quick note, this is strictly a tutorial on how to edit with Lightroom, not how to use Lightroom in its full potential, so keep that in mind. Switch to develop mode. On the left, we have the navigation and zoom function and the presets tab. These three will be mostly used when you edit. At the bottom, you have the gallery, where you select, flag, color, and rate your photos if you need to. And at the right, you have the tools that will help you edit. Also, all four have these small arrows that allow you to hide the panels so you can have a better view of what you're doing. This is the photo that we are going to start with. So for now, we're going to hide the top, left, and bottom panels. This photo was shot around 4 p.m. afternoon. As you can see, the golden hour look is already baked in. But for our first look, we are going to transform this afternoon shot in a cold morning one. So let's start with temperature and tint. Exposure to 0.88. Lower the highlights to -60. And the whites to -20. Increase the shadows to +70. And blacks to +20. We increased the clarity to +20 only for this look. Texture, clarity, and dehaze affect how soft or how detailed your photo is from a light and shadow perspective. When we reach the photos that need to be fixed, I will explain how the color correction sliders work in more detail. For this look, I don't want the colors to pop, so we leave vibrance at 0 and only decrease the saturation to -16. I usually keep saturation under -20 because otherwise it's too desaturated. And if we don't want the desaturated look, we don't need to go beyond -20. Now on to one of the most powerful tools of any editing program, the tone curve tool. I will cover the tone curve tool in its own video, but for now I will briefly explain how to use it. From the bottom left corner to the top left corner, you have control over the black areas in your image, from normal blacks to flat to almost no blacks. From the bottom left corner to the bottom right one, you can control how strong the blacks are. From the top right corner to the top left, how strong the whites are, and from the top right to bottom right, how weak they are. Everything in between is highlights, midtones, and shadows. Yes, the very same settings like we have in the sliders above. And yes, you can edit with just one of these two tools to get the same results. The only difference is that the tone curve tool allows you to have a more refined control over how you edit. Let me show you. Quick tip that saved my life many times. Hold down the Alt key on your keyboard or the Option key if you're on a Mac and left-click the diagonal line. This way you set fixed points without moving the line by accident. These points will allow you to better control the tone curve. Now let's create a soft light by lowering the top corner and then lowering the midtones and shadows just a little bit. Next step is the HSL, which as you can see stands for Hue, Saturation, and Luminance. The hue allows you to switch between colors from the same color spectrum. As you can see, orange is between red and yellow. The saturation affects the intensity of the color, and luminance allows you to increase or decrease the brightness of the color. Red hue to 0, saturation to -12, and luminance to +22. Now orange, we're gonna leave saturation at 0, desaturate it just under -20, and increase the luminance near 10. Now yellow. We're gonna decrease the hue towards orange, basically. Decrease the saturation and leave the luminance as it is, because we do not want the skin tones to pop too much, because the light does not shine on the face in this photo. And now onto greens. We move the hue towards the aqua color. I want to decrease the saturation because I don't want that much green in my photo, and also the luminance. Now aqua and blue are for the sky mostly, so on aqua I'm gonna leave it at 0, the hue, and I'm going to decrease the saturation near 30 and crank up to the max the luminance. Now to blue. Hue towards aqua, saturation -15, and luminance -12. Now purple. Let's move it towards red, so +100 on the hue, saturation 0, and luminance just +67. Magenta, +70, 75. We're gonna leave the saturation as it is, and we're gonna brighten up just a little bit. Now the skin looks good. When working with portraits and skin in general, the red, orange, and yellow sliders are your top priority. Next, split tones. This tool allows you to color your highlights and shadows. This tool is heavily used when creating a certain film look. For the look we want, I want to color only my highlights. So we click on the color picker box, choose a color, and the higher you go, the more saturation you will have, and the lower you go, the less and more natural it will look. Okay, we will go with this color, and we will lower its saturation around under 10. Alright, 9 is perfect. Now you see here that the sharpness settings, and not only them, are already set, but grayed out. There is a way to adjust them to be at 0 every time, but you can Google that on your own. I'm going to lower the sharpness to 15 since I don't want the photo to be over sharpened. Noise reduction to 10, and for those who don't know, noise in the photos is that grain you see especially when you take photos at night with very low light. Noise can be artistic too, but that depends on what look you're going for to begin with. Lens correction. We check remove chromatic aberration. The chromatic aberration is a failure of a lens to focus all its colors to the same point. This settings allows you to fix that. Now lens profile. Here you can select which lens you used, and it will correct its lens distortion. Some lenses have a bit of distortion. Take for example the fisheye lens. Now with these settings you can fix it. I shot this one with a Sigma lens of 16mm f1.4. Now we're going down directly to calibration. I almost never use the rest of the settings, so we're going to skip them for now. The color calibration tool allows you to calibrate your colors, but not like the HSL. The HSL allows you to control the individual colors and their tones. Color calibration, on the other hand, controls them on a global level. For example, the red primary affects orange, yellow, magenta, and purple too. I use this tool almost never, as I prefer to work with the HSL, but when I do use it, I start with the blues and then work my way up. Okay, blue primary hue seems to be good around -26, and the saturation to around +43. Let's see greens. Okay, hue looks pretty good around +29. And oddly enough, saturation at +28 does the magic. Let's check reds. Nah, I don't like them, so let's double click to reset to 0. Alright, these look good the way they are, so I'm not going to touch the shadow and tint slider. And so we created our first look. Now let's save it as a preset to use it for later. Open the left panel back, go to the presets and click on the plus icon. Now here is the most important part. Save only what you need to always have in the preset. For example, the filters can sometimes destroy the photo if you leave them as they were set from another edit, and then you don't know why the preset does not work properly. Also, if you plan on selling or giving this preset to someone, the filters should not be saved. But if you do leave them there, please inform the person you are giving this preset to so they can remove them or adjust them to their needs. Now create a group or folder, give it a name, create, and here it is in the panel with the rest of the presets. Now one small tip, press Y on your keyboard to see the before and after so you can see how far you've come with the edit, or to save it as a screenshot to show your work. Press Y again and you are back to your edit. One last thing before we move on to the next photos, let's create a reset to default settings preset. You can do this before you edit a photo when everything is untouched, or you go on and double click on everything to reset them, and once they're reset, you save it as a preset. Alright, now to the second look. The first one was a cold morning. Now let's go for a warm afternoon. Since we already have that look baked in, we're just going to enhance it by a little bit. Now I want you to pay attention to what I do and try to figure out why I set the settings that way. And don't worry, I will also walk you through this. So, warm afternoon. Temperature around here. Tint to +14. And exposure to just 0.34. Decreasing the highlights to -29. And the whites to -76. Skins are looking good. Now shadows, as always, +70. Most of the time I go to +70 because it really is a good value for me and how I shoot. And blacks to +49. Now we're going to decrease clarity by -15 since we want a warm light but we do not want a warm fuzzy light. So we're going to increase the dehaze also to +10. Texture stays at 0. This time we want the colors to pop a bit more, so we're going to increase vibrance to +34 and decrease the saturation just under -20 because we don't want a gray image. Curves, this time we're not going to use fixed points, so we're going for a free curve sort of. This looks good. Now to the HSL. We're going to increase the red hue to around +30 and saturation to -9. And luminance to +49. Orange, -15. Saturation 0. And luminance -14. Onto yellow. Hue to -10. Saturation to 0. And luminance to -19. Now the skin looks really good. I don't want any greens in my photo, so bye-bye greens, -100 to all of them. And since we've changed the temperature of our photo, We kind of remove the aquas and the blues, so we leave them alone. And same goes for purple and magenta. Split tones. In the highlights, I'm going to choose this one and lower its saturation to 10. Now shadows. This one looks good, so I'm gonna lower it to 15. Okay, that really looks good. We're not gonna touch the balance slider, so let's move on. Sharpness around 15 and noise again around 10. Lens correction as before, and now down to calibration. Okay, it seems only the blue primary hue and the green primary saturation is gonna help us in this situation. Alright, let's save this one too. Now before and after, and done. Now let's reset and move on to the third look. Now for the third and final look of this image. We are going to go for one famous look, the dark brown coffee moody something something look. We're not touching the temperature, tint, and exposure on this one, but we are going to increase the contrast by plus 37. Highlights and whites are going to be decreased. When creating a dark moody look, highlights and whites are always decreased. Shadows obviously to plus 70, and blacks around plus 40. Now we're going to use the texture just around 10, clarity around plus 40. Usually you don't go above 20, but this time we need to. And dehaze decrease to minus 13. Vibrance to near 35. And saturation near minus 15. Alright, let's see before and after. All good. Now on to curves. Alright, these look exactly the way we want them. If you move the black point up, you will always get this faded look. Now to the HSL. Reds to plus 30, saturation to minus 41, and luminance to plus 21. Orange, minus 15, no saturation, and luminance minus 22. Anti-yellow, hue to minus 10, again no saturation, and luminance plus 31. Okay, it looks brownish enough. Green, blue, purple, and magenta go to minus 100, and only aqua goes to plus 100. No split tones needed for this look, so we go to sharpness around 3 and noise around 12. Looks okay. Lens correction, as always. Also forgot to mention, you input the lens you used, not the Sigma one I used, just to make it clear. Now let's check calibration one last time. Alright, blue primary to minus 18, and its saturation to plus 14. Green to plus 23 and saturation minus 17. And reds, apparently, to plus 7 and minus 12. Alright, time to save. So we created 3 different looks for and from just one photo. Remember, a presets roll is there just to be a starting point. 10 to 20% of the time, the preset will be a one-click edit and you'll just have to export the photo, and that's it. But 80 to 90% of the time, you will need to adjust the preset so it will work with the photo you're working with. In the beginning of this video, I mentioned color correction. There are 2 methods that are used in any edit. Color correction, which corrects the overall exposure of the image, light, shadows, contrast, and so on, and color grading, which grades the photo or video with certain colors. Basically, color correction fixes the photo and color grading gives it a unique look. But one is dependent on the other because you cannot have a cool color grading on a complete dark photo or a too bright one. So far you have seen 3 different color corrections and gradings, but those were on a photo that was properly exposed in camera. Now we're going to fix 2 photos that were not properly exposed. Let's start with the overexposed one. Overexposed means everything is too bright. Now if you overexpose a shot, you'll have some parts that are clipped. Clipping highlights or shadows means that they are pure white or pure black, and there is absolutely no information there anymore, which means you cannot restore any detail in that area. Now there are 2 ways we can go about this fix. First we color correct using the sliders, and then we move here above and use the filters to further enhance the correction or vice versa. From my experience so far, you can go any way you want since you can go back and readjust any settings. But the best practice is to first adjust locally using the filters and then adjust globally using the tone curve and sliders. So let's begin with a gradual filter. Click it, and then click and drag it over your photo. The larger you make it, the more area is affected. And if you hover over with your mouse, you can see the gradient it makes and how much of the image will be affected. For example, if I lower the exposure, you can see how much it is affected and in what areas. Now the parts you need to always remember. Exposure affects the overall image in terms of highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. The rest of the sliders affect the individual parts of the overall exposure. This means you always balance out one with the other. For this image, since we have a lot of people and some signs in it, I will go for a desaturated look and try to make use of contrast to mask the people and some signs, if I can. Alright, bottom to top gradient, exposure minus 1.47, Contrast 74. Highlights minus 81. Shadows minus 100. Whites minus 71. And blacks remain at 0. And close. Second gradient from middle to top a bit. Highlights minus 55. Shadows minus 81. And whites minus 35. These are the ones I want to target because of the white and bright colors we have in the middle of the photo. Okay, top to bottom gradient. We're not gonna touch the exposure. Contrast to 49. Highlights to minus 55. Shadows, again, minus 81. Whites, minus 35. And blacks, minus 54. And close. Okay, let's first go down to lens correction, fix that, and then move to the sliders. Good, now to the sliders. We're not gonna touch the exposure. Contrast to plus 49. Highlights to minus 86. Shadows plus 86. Whites minus 33. And blacks remain at 0. Texture remains at 0. Clarity to plus 16. Dehaze to plus 14. Vibrance minus 20 and saturation minus 27 because I want it to be desaturated. Tone curves. This looks good so far. Now HSL, all saturations to minus 20. Split tone, I want a cold, desaturated look, so we're going for a teal and blue in the highlights and in shadows. These are okay. Now sharpening, around 20, and noise around 15. This look looks alright to me. So this is one way on how to fix an overexposed photo and give it a decent look. And remember, this will only work on raw images. On JPEGs, you have zero chance of saving something. Okay, now the underexposed one. Let's bump the exposure to see what we're working with. Okay, around 2 is alright. Let's bump the contrast. Okay, let's increase the shadows and blacks. Now we can do the usual. Highlights and whites decreased. And judging by the noise in this photo, we're going to work only with clarity. Vibrance and saturation. Okay, these look good. Now let's apply a gradual filter from right to left, since the light in the photo is in the same direction. We have exposure already high, so let's just play with contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, and we leave blacks at 0 and close. Now it's looking good. For the curve tone, we're gonna go with the fixed points and then a slight increase in the shadows and lowering the highlights just a little bit. Okay, HSL. Okay, on the reds, only luminance at plus 67. Orange hue minus 7. Saturation minus 17. And luminance plus 82. Yellow, green, and aqua remain at 0. Blue, hue minus 22. Saturation minus 26. Luminance plus 37. Purple, hue at minus 100. Saturation 0 and luminance plus 100. And magenta, everything at 0 except hue at plus 100. Split tone. Okay, we're gonna go with an orange yellow in the highlights and saturation at plus 14, and blue in the shadows with a saturation of 11, sharpening to 12, noise reduction to 19, remove chromatic aberration, and we're gonna leave the profile correction. We're not gonna use it. Now let's see if the calibration gives us anything. Blue primary, hue to minus 12, saturation around plus 76. Green primary, okay, plus 11 on the hue and plus 30 on saturation. Now let's see reds. Okay, hue at 0 and apparently saturation at minus 7. This looks just alright. And this is one way to fix an underexposed photo and give it a really good look. Okay, so the final photo, the one we're gonna reframe and apply one of the presets. I went ahead and saved the grading from the underexposed one as a preset, so we're gonna use that one. Now go to the top where the filters are and click on the crop tool. Now you're in crop mode. You can rotate it by going to one of the corners, click outside of the frame and rotate it. And then click on one of the corners and adjust it how you want to. Also, you can click on the side of the frame to adjust it the way you want. Now if you go and click on the lock icon, it will constrain its proportions. So when you adjust the crop, all sides move simultaneously. Now let's readjust some of the settings to make it look good. And we're done. Thank you for sticking till the end. I hope it distracted your mind a little bit and also learned something new regarding editing and maybe photography as well. And until next time, stay safe, stay home, and wash your hands.